everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Heretic Hammer Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall, and this is my co-host, Dylan.
Hello, hello.
Although, in a way, today, the roles feel slightly reversed, because that's right, the slideshow is back.
Not so fast, Marshall.
It is Gundam time, which means, in a way, Dylan is the host today.
It's not just Gundam time, my friend. It's time for episode 2 of Mobile Suit Gundam, Dylan's Counterattack.
Except we're not speaking of Char's counterattack today.
No. But we'll get to that. I just picked the name because it's fun.
Yes.
Yes, we're doing it. We're bringing it back. We're making it a thing.
Yes. Woo! It's that time of the month.
Woo! So, as you all know, around April Fool's time, we did a special fun little episode where I spent a few hours giving Marshall kind of a general overview of Mobile Suit Gundam as a concept. We briefly went over some of the overarching ideas of the original series, Mobile Suit Gundam 0079. And we also talked about Gundam in terms of the model kits, the very popular model kits known as Gunpla, as well as Gundam as a video game franchise.
And boy, did it
I had a very specific goal, which was to kind of ease Marshall into the idea of Mobile Suit Gundam as a franchise as a whole, while also just kind of having a lot of fun with it because it was an April Fool's thing. Mm-hmm. And the response from everybody, not just Marshall, was pretty big. It was pretty spectacular for us.
Yeah, my reaction there was largely induced to my own feelings, but then, it wasn't just mine.
No, there was a very clear interest in us continuing this, and for me, the most important thing, of course, was that Marshall's takeaway from it was that he was interested and wanted to learn more. So because of that, here we are. We're actually going to dig a little bit deeper into this franchise. I'm not going to promise, extremely in-depth coverage of every single series of Gundam that exists.
No.
The idea of this is that we really want to be able to kind of review a lot of the major aspects of the franchise, but also tie it into the discussions that we've had previously with the Heretic Hammer podcast about not just the lore, the quote-unquote lore, the story of it all, but also how it pertains to the hobbies of playing the games, building model kits, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. But today, we are going to really go for it. In the first episode, it was a very general overview of 0079, more so about the setting and introducing a couple of the main characters. But in the time since then, Marshall has gone ahead and watched 0079 through the trilogy of films that was released in 1981 and 1982 that were meant to be this sort of way of condensing this series that was over 40 episodes. It really did. They took a series that was over 40 episodes and they condensed it down to about I'd say 7.5 hours or so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because each one is rough. Some reach, I think, 3, but some are roughly 3 hours.
Most of them are between. They're largely 2.5. I believe the third is the longest one, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I can't remember the times exactly.
Yeah, but yeah. So we're gonna get deeper into why we chose to have Marshall view 0079 for the first time that way, and get very deep into these films themselves, as today's episode is the Mobile Suit Gundam movie trilogy. Like I mentioned before, it was released between 1981 and 82, a series of 3 films meant to do what feels like an impossible task to maintain a lot of the core story of an entire television series while somehow being shorter in length than the Lord of the Rings extended editions. And they did it. You know, they made it happen. I want to talk a little about why we did it this way. Why I was okay with you, instead of watching the entire Mobile Suit Gundam 0079 series as your starting point, why I was okay with doing the movie trilogy. Mm-hmm. There is a lot to say about seeing the anime in like its initial form in its original state. Mm-hmm. But there's also, in terms of like why these movies were made to begin with, is that Tomino had an opportunity to create these films that would not just condense things. Like it makes the runtime shorter, sure, but that's not the only thing that's being done with these films. There is a very clear intent to really emphasize the core story and to trim out a lot of the fat. And by fat, I mean a lot of the monster of the week stuff that Sunrise, expected of the series, the initial series. There are a lot of episodes that there's not a lot of like significant plot points happening. And it's more so just like various mobile suits and Xeon suits that are appearing, because the more new mobile suits you create, the more models you can sell based on those.
Boys.
So a big thing with the movies is that they trim out a lot of that in particular, but there are additions. There are changes made to certain events, and there are like additions made, particularly in the third film. The third film does a lot to kind of like expand out some of the final conflicts that happen in this series. Little bit more of like an increased budget that they're working with that allows them to do some really cool things with some of the visuals, and basically give it more of a structured overall plot that makes a little more sense, doesn't feel like it's dragging out quite so much. At the end of this episode, I want to talk about some of the trade-offs of that, some of the negatives that come with, cutting so much of the original series out in order to make this movie trilogy. But before we do that, I want to get your initial thoughts as somebody who had seen Gundam anime in the past. We spoke in the previous episode about your familiarity with Gundam Wing. But this was your first time truly diving into anything with 0079, the original series. So as a series of films, honestly, just what did you think? What are your general thoughts about this story, having seen it now?
Yeah, so obviously I could tell from the jump, right? Like, or especially like as I got in through the second movie, that like I could tell when some things had been truncated, some things had been kind of pushed along. I mean, I'll make this note right away. Also, obviously, there's going to be spoilers in this episode.
Don't worry. I was going to put that wall up for sure.
Because duh. But hold on. I'm trying to. Oh, yes. But like no greater example was that made more obvious to me than watching in through. I think it was like through part of the second episode, like the second movie, going into the third movie, and it's just kind of like, this Slegger Law guy just kind of shows up, and then all of a sudden, he and Mirai have a relationship. That's like one of the things that like get completely over, like just completely over, like shadow.
He really shows up, he shows out, and then he shoves off.
Right,
is the way that I would describe it.
Yeah. So there are plenty of times.
We'll have a lot to discuss on that.
Yeah. So there are plenty of times where I would appear and I'd be like, oh, like this just happened. Okay. But like that didn't mean that necessarily there weren't things that weren't impactful. I think one of the biggest things that I do say that the movie does really showcase is it really brings and keeps the storyline that we talked about, that original purpose of Gundam, which is not, wow, cool robot, and instead is war is bad.
Yes, correct. I don't have the meme up on the screen this time. You'll have to do it from memory. But yes,
I'll have to put
always
it
something
myself.
to consider.
But yeah, so that's the big thing is, I think the biggest thing that very clearly showcased that from the jump was the realm that was their utilization of Garma Zabi. He is immediately showcased as he and Char have a very back and forth fun good relationship, right? They show them as friends with each other, and then you see Garma and his love interest. You see the fact that even though her dad doesn't like Zeon and whatnot, but they have control over the area, blah blah blah, more things. Sorry. It's very clear. He makes it very clear that despite all that, his wish is to just be with her, do his part, make essentially do the thing that he just needs to do, and then quit, retire, and have a good, fun, noble life, as the rich tend to do. But that's the thing, right? They're showing it, even though there may be some principal issues in the back end, right? That whole overarching thing of but is he getting into this position for good reasons? Sure, whatever. But what he's in control of, he is in that realm of, my goal and job is to be with you, start a family, and move on, right? And that's they should the movie does really good at adding a lot of weight to that, and then obviously that relates to him then being this not relatable maybe, but tragedy for you to look at as a viewer, and then have some form of initial sympathy for members of the Zabi family, because when he dies, they bring all the characters in, and most of them, save maybe one specific Zabi brother, are generally fairly while I would say they all hold a very hard shell, most of them showcase a realm of sadness, and obviously just of mourning, right? Whether it's not them breaking down and crying, but it's them just understanding.
No, they all have very different reactions because they all had very different relationships with Garma. Real quick, I'm going to stop you there because we're kind of jumping immediately right into a lot of the more detailed events.
Sure.
I want us to pull back a bit. Let's pull back, because I figure we're going to kind of go through and we're going to discuss all three films.
Sure.
What I am curious about, just before we get started into that, is covering the general basics of the overall story. How did you enjoy this story, having seen a lot of I assume anime and film and television series afterward that were directly or indirectly inspired by it? When you were watching these movies and watching this story, did it feel like it dated in any way to you? Was there anything about it that was really unexpected or anything of that sort? How did you feel about these as films in general?
I actually thought that they hold up decently well. Obviously there were a few aspects. I mean, like the fact that we talked, we obviously roughly alluded to the bright slap concept, but like, yeah,
we're gonna get there.
Yeah, obviously the fact that everybody slaps each other constantly is a semi-hilarious.
Yep.
Because it'd be one thing if it was like one specific type, like person doing it. It's literally everyone to everyone. So like, but like, like the big thing of obviously like, there are some things that maybe are like a little dated, but like, I think the big thing that it only suffers from like a semi-dated aspect is pacing. And I think that's obviously it's twofold, right? It's because it's this movie breakdown, and then it's the acknowledgement of how pacing is in today's shows versus shows of 1979.
Yes, because when it comes to the original series, you'll find that it kind of ends up, you don't get that happy medium. These films are obviously very fast paced. They're giving you a lot of information really quickly and cutting out a lot to make that happen. And then when you watch the original series, you'll find that there is a lot of moments of like really excessive downtime, and a lot of things really get dragged out. It's not a case of like, because it's a lot longer, everything that's happening in there is very important. Like, no, there is admittedly a lot of filler in the original series, and it, depending on your preference or, what you enjoy, like you'll probably spend a lot of that time being like, all right, let me check my watch here, because it really could be going a lot faster. And then you get to the films and it's like, all right, this is faster. It's getting to the more important stuff more quickly. But there's a couple things that are missing, and we'll dive into that a bit. But it's not quite the happy compromise between the two that you would want the films to be.
No, and I think that becomes kind of clear. But at the same time, I don't think I watched it and felt like, damn, I really think I would have liked, or damn, I really could have used this and that. I think there were some things where it's just like, okay, maybe I could have seen more on this, but we'll get, and this is obviously a topic for another time, but funny enough, I feel like I still, even in the films, had a lot more understanding for characters' motives and decisions and like timings and movement from this set of films versus some of those in a singular, always meant to be a film sequel of Char's Counterattack. And we'll get to that then, but like that pacing, funny enough to me though, was still better in this than even say in something like that.
Interesting. Okay.
I'll have a number of opinions about that when we get there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So for anyone not aware, Marshall not only did he see these three films, he also went ahead and watched Char's Counterattack.
Yes. Somewhat mistakenly.
It's not the end of the world. It essentially,
granted, I was not going to be able to watch Zeta Gundam in between that. There was almost no shot.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it was never my intention to be like, you need to watch all of this.
Right. Well, and the reason for that is inevitably going to be in when we discuss maybe why I chose to watch this trilogy this way and not the full series.
Right. And we'll get into that further. But yeah, essentially, the thing I'm just kind of trying to get to, it's like Char's Counterattack, really you're just experiencing a moment out of time. It's not like crazy far flung into the future. It's like several years after the events of these first three films.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not being like thrown completely for a loop. There's still, recognizable characters that you can kind of latch on to. And it's something where my plan is for us to do an episode on Char's Counterattack in the future. But ideally, we're going to kind of go through and cover Zeta and Double Zeta first, because those do technically come before Char's counterattack in the timeline.
Correct.
And without saying too much, Char does play a role in those series as well. And it's good to have the context of what he does in those series to then go into counterattack from there.
Right. Well, and that's a big thing too, because I do think we'll get into it further, but like that's my number one critique, and the thing that I do feel like was lacking the most in this original trilogy set is Char's motive. It just doesn't get Char's motive doesn't get the proper light it should. And it makes everything that you then, I think it hurts because it makes then the things you watch afterward make less and less sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes the movie 3 discussion we're gonna have here, I think will be interesting in that regard, because I don't entirely disagree with you.
Yeah,
I think it does a pretty good job of detailing like this is why he's doing what he's doing, but yeah, it definitely feels like there's like major context still kind of missing.
Yeah, exactly.
There may even be in a completely separate anime series called Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin.
Yeah.
That is almost entirely from Char Aznabul's perspective of everything that happened with him leading up to the 1 Year War.
Right.
Just because, you see what he does and you're like, hey, I need more of an idea of what
Why the
made
fuck?
this guy, do what he does in 0079. Like, I need a little more meat on these bones. But yeah, I feel like we're gonna probably just keep saying variations of we'll get to it. So I think honestly the best thing we can do is just get into it, because I'm like thrilled. I personally have seen the original 0079 in its entirety. I had also seen these 3 movies previously, years and years ago. So I rewatched them for the purposes of being able to talk about them here with Marshall. I will say on my end, my very quick takeaway, I was very surprised at how many moments still like moved me genuinely. Even though I knew a lot of the beats of what was going to happen, there are still like a lot of very specific things that caught me off guard of like, oh yeah, I forgot that happens in that way. And like certain lines, certain quotes where I'm like, oh man, I forgot about that. That's a really, like, we all know the memes, we know the meme quotes, we know the stuff that gets passed around. And then there's like other things that get dropped that really do so much for the characterization of everyone involved in this story. And I genuinely, like, there were a couple moments where I was genuinely moved, and just by what was happening on the screen and the implication and what was occurring, particularly in the 3rd movie, that just made me be like, oh my God, yeah, like of course, this is why I love this so much. It continues to be, it has aged in various ways, but the core story and the core characters to me are still so fantastic. And it is a deeply compelling story, whether it's told in this form or in the original series form.
Right.
I think the best thing we can do is to just kind of hop into it. We're going to go a movie at a time.
Yeah.
And just kind of mark out and go through the details and just talk about Gundam. Just really dive in.
Right.
So we're going to start with the very first film, Mobile Suit Gundam 1.
Yes.
From 1981. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, I think it brings in the setting very well. Like when you start, I didn't have it was nice because like I didn't really have a lot of questions about going into it. Like, it didn't like make it seem weird. It was just like it tells you everything you need to know about like the history. It doesn't obviously maybe initially placate kind of a sympathetic view to Zeon, right?
Oh, absolutely. No,
like,
yeah, they are very quickly like established as sort of the quote unquote bad
they're
guys
dropping
right
fucking they're dropping these fucking shits with all of the people on them.
Yes. So
like the comments in the first episode really wanted to point out that like because you did it in a very good job of like trying to play around
this
with
this
the fact
has to
that
be
like
addressed. This has to be addressed.
with the fact that like they when you think about it like on its baseline and what and like and what whoops I'll have to get cut out and what like sorry you were trying to placate the aspect of obviously like who is really in the right and wrong, because like when you think of especially war, there is a large amount of time and everything where somebody is, or like where one side is not necessarily the good guy and one side is not necessarily the bad side. And like in the long term of the series, obviously it tries to, like good writing does, it tries to give you that as you go, but you trying to feed that to me as like as a snack, as a tipping point. You obviously it came across maybe somewhat as this idea that like, well, but then they do this thing, and you don't, and it's like, and obviously the comments will be like, yeah, let's be clear.
Yes, let's be clear. The people that left those comments, by the way, not mad, greatly appreciate them.
Absolutely.
I love that people came out of the woodwork and were like, okay, but here are the facts. So listen, I 100% undersold the concept of the colony drop.
Oh yeah.
For two reasons. One, I was stressed about making sure that we had time to cover everything else that we were covering.
Right.
And two, I didn't want to go too deep into the impact of the colony drops because I wasn't sure if this was something that we were going to be coming back and doing more of in the future.
Yeah. Right.
Obviously, I very much it was like a bullet point on the slide and then we moved on. But I also downplayed the impact of a colony drop significantly. I made the point of being like, yeah, it essentially wiped out a city. But, and like what the comments brought up, it's much more accurate. It is, I used the term of like nuclear weapon, but it can't be understated or overstated rather, that it is, we're talking about a nuclear weapon at the greatest degree. Like a full-on atomic bomb, not just like something that's going to clear out a city. We're talking about something that could clear out like nations.
Yeah. I mean, like I think one of the jokes I saw was like Australia, like effectively it's like it just would wipe out Australia.
Yeah, I specifically mentioned that like Sydney, the city of Sydney was completely obliterated. But the actual impact is so much greater than that. That was just like, I wanted to give you like a reference point you could think of in your mind of like, I have a general idea of how big Sydney is. So I can perceive like, okay, this is a pretty big deal. But I definitely undersold it. But in this, it's condensed. But you do get to see in these films some of the imagery of a colony drop occurring and just how disastrous it is.
Very specifically at the beginning of every film, because they play the same intro at the beginning of all three films.
They make sure you don't forget it. They do a little recap at the beginning of these films so that you just kind of like a here's what you missed on Glee type thing. Yeah. Where they kind of recap a little bit of it, and they always make sure to show that to you. So it's like you don't forget. This did happen.
Yeah. Well, this did happen, and you have to remember that especially Xeon and obviously specifically the Zabi family are the one who pressed this.
Yes.
But when we get into that, like the beginning of the movie, right? Like, so it gives you this impact. And the reason that though, I feel like in the first movie, obviously it's so good to mention that is because you're watching now these clearly this like baseline like the way that they start these, where they're going into the side and they're seeing they're trying to check for things, and they mentioned that they're looking for Federation tech, like this new weapon, whatever.
Yes,
but
there's three Zaku's. They sneak into the colony. The colony is already in the process of being evacuated, but they sneak into the colony. They're looking for these supposed state-of-the-art mobile suits that are secretly being developed by the Federation.
But in the back of your mind, that's your thought, right? Is this all happening because obviously they're is this happening because they're planning to drop this colony somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. That's in the back of your mind. And so that gives you that kind of thought of oh, okay, so obviously this has happened now. I forgot how many times. More than once, which is already too many. So, you're now that they know that Zeon not only does this, but has now done this more than once. So it's not just it's a threat. It's if you see him and you don't have the entirety of Federation forces with you, there's a good chance that your side is going down. So it's we gotta move. And that to me is kind of the thing then, where it's there's added stress to them not only evacuating, but obviously quietly evacuating, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Because they know that they don't want to alert the Zeon forces that are coming to them, that they're aware that they're coming and that they're escaping, which again, it's one of those things that I don't even think in the original show maybe that they would have drawn attention to it. But if you think about the emotional and the conceptual impact of, you have got these space noids so terrified that you will drop them into the planet, that they will just quietly try to run from you, because they fear that if you know that you're coming and are running, that you might kill them faster.
But also just the fact that they had, they started out, the Principality of Zeon was established on side 3. And so there's that kind of thing of we know that they can essentially bring sides onto their side. They can bring in these colonies to be a part of their principality as they are growing in power, which means that they're more likely to just directly attack these different sides. Not just the whole idea of the colony drop, but even just air raids and bringing in, their Zaku's, their mobile units to directly attack these sides. Means that for a lot of these people living on these colonies, it's we don't. There are neutral zones that have been established. There are neutral spaces, but for the most part, it's this feeling of oh yeah, no, they could come for us at any time.
Yeah.
So,
but then Amuro has no care for this seemingly.
So yeah, perfect. So let's now talk about our main protagonist, because the 3 Zaku's sneak into the colony. They start firing. They start attacking. Everyone is being evacuated, and that includes Amuro Ray. Within the context of this first film and your introduction here, how do you feel about Amuro Ray as our protagonist?
I mean, so it's tough, because I think the one thing that the movie, this is maybe another thing that I didn't mention. I obviously pointed at Char as being one of the biggest things, but this is another inherently large thing, is that I don't know if it's just the movie or if it's just because it was an older show or whatever. My feeling is that it's because it's the movie, but the movie, one of the biggest things that gets to me about the movie and Amuro's character is when it picks and chooses what existential thing that he is having a problem with. I don't think is properly chosen. For example, he goes in, he quickly studies, fights, and deals with the mobile suit. And, he has a realization, right? Like, I have to do that. Like, if I, because he's in the suit, like, if I don't do this, it's either I kill him or I die, right? And that concept, that statement is used in more than one series. In fact, it was used in the current series. But, like, and I get that, but like, you don't like the fact that he has murdered somebody for the first time and then potentially his dad.
Yes. So his father,
it's just like his emotional impact to that is like not touched at all.
His father, Tem Ray, is working on the development of these experimental mobile suits.
Yes.
Amuro runs out to find his father. The father is currently you see the Gundam. They are in the process of loading up the Gundam. They're getting ready to prepare it to put into the white base. And his father tells him, hey, just run, get back to safety. Don't stay. There's this huge explosion. Amuro isn't entirely sure what has happened to his father, if his father is still alive. But he obviously decides that, he needs to do something about it. A really interesting thing about Amuro as a character is that he is established before any of this. When we first see him, he is working. We established in the last episode that like he's a mechanic. He's very smart. Tinkers with things, invents things, works with machines.
Which is funny given that they call him a hobbyer.
Yeah, they call him a hobbyer. And he, at the very start of this, everyone's being evacuated and he is like pointedly ignoring it. Like it is a nuisance to him. He's like, I'm busy. Yeah. I'm trying to work on my stuff. Which is a trait that carries over throughout these movies and throughout the series is that
we love our neurodivergent representation.
Yeah, he gets very focused. He gets very hyper fixated, especially when he's like working on mechanical stuff. He's clearly very passionate about it. And he has a tendency to kind of shut off the rest of the world and just like ignore people. Particularly his friend and sort of semi-maternal replacement in the absence of his own mother. Marshall, how is her name pronounced?
Frabo.
Yeah. So
I mean, I watched it subbed, so that's I don't know if they did it differently
correct.
In the movie. I know. Well, in Char, I think I don't remember. Did they say her name? I thought they said her name once, but
yeah, they still say her name. Like it's subtitled, but obviously the Japanese voices they still say the name. But yeah, Frau Bao.
Frau Bao.
I've heard Frau Bao a lot.
Oh, interesting.
So she has a really interesting position in this story in that in a lot of ways she is sort of a voice of reason. She's very doting. She cares a lot about Amuro, obviously. And like I said, she kind of takes on a lot of these like maternal instincts and ends up sort of being she has to be not only his friend but also sort of a parental figure because he really fixates on whatever it is that he's thinking of in the moment. He doesn't think about basic things like taking care of himself and making sure that he's healthy. He's not prioritizing that at all. And she often has to kind of step in and remind him to be like, hey, you need to eat food. Like you need to do the basic things to keep yourself healthy and keep yourself safe instead of focusing on this other stuff. The two of them are getting ready to evacuate. Amuro leaves to find his father, finds his father. Amuro picks up a notebook, like this heavy notebook that is sort of like an instruction manual for the Gundam, for the new mobile suit. And using that notebook as well as his own mechanical experience, manages to actually pilot the Gundam and fight off the Zaku that are attacking. Right away, he discovers a really interesting thing about how the mobile suits are built, which is that the reactor that is powering the mobile suits, if you damage it directly, it will cause an enormous explosion that can result in like greater casualties. And we see that happen where he destroys a Zaku and the reactor inside the Zaku goes off and it blows a hole in the wall of the colony and causes
sucking his dad out.
Yeah, it like sucks people out into space.
He's not at the time aware that his dad was sucked out, but inevitably that becomes his disappearance, you know.
Yes. From there, he successfully manages to drive off the Zaku. After destroying them, he joins the White Base. I want to point out something that's really interesting to me about this film. Going back to the war, the whole like this is war angle. It's really compelling to me that they were smart enough when writing this series to have it so that the Zeon forces, for a long time, they're relying only on what they know from reconnaissance. So they don't know that the White Base is called the White Base, and they don't refer to it as such for like most of the series.
Yeah.
They're frequently calling it the Trojan Horse, particularly Char likes to refer to it as the Trojan Horse. And the mobile suit program, they refer to as, I believe it's like Operation 5 or Operation V. And they call it that because they wouldn't possibly know what these things are actually called. Like, they're not going to just magically have access to the name of like all of this military equipment. And it's a similar thing on the Federation side, is like they don't know a lot of the names of the new Zeon mobile units that get introduced until they find out after the fact.
Right.
And it's a really nice, I just think it's like a really nice detail that they maintain consistently throughout the series. To the point, like, Char is doing reconnaissance. He's trying to find more information on the Gundam. He gets shot at, and he has like these binoculars that he's using to try to like capture video footage and data of the Gundam. That gets destroyed, unfortunately. So now it's a case of like, well, now they have to go off of his word. Like his descriptions of what this is, now that's all they have to work off of. And it's a really neat detail that they continue throughout, like just this idea of like how important reconnaissance is during war.
Yeah. And I mean, so I mean, kind of try to move us along a little bit.
Yes.
I'm looking, I looked down and I was like, oh God, we're at 45 minutes already.
So much to talk about.
I have to be done by 12:15. So, but yeah, so we, that's the thing. So yeah, I mean, then it becomes obviously though with White Base that like they're, obviously in all of the first movie, they're kind of like a scenario of just like, it's just a constant almost escape sequence, right? Where it's just like, we have to go to safety, go back, get in with Federation forces, and get White Base essentially to, essentially to get it to safety amongst with all of the civilians and 3 children that constantly are on the bridge for whatever reason. It's just, I say that in a realm of like thinking of it. Obviously, it was an aspect of a show, but like thinking about it from like a realistic perspective, the idea that these children would just constantly show up on a fucking live combat bridge.
Let's. So
no.
we're on
no
the White Base
for that.
We're on the White Base. There are tons of civilians that are aboard that are refugees. Part of them, you have Kika, Katz, and Let's, the 3 children that we talked about, who end up kind of developing this stronger relationship with the crew of the White Base and end up sticking around. It is very funny how insistent they are at the beginning of like, we need to get these kids off the ship. We are actively being pursued by Zaku all the time. We need to get them off the ship. And then by the time you get to like halfway through movie 2, they're like, we need to keep these kids on the ship. We love them. They're important to us. If anything happens to them, I will destroy the entire universe. Do not separate them from us. They need to stay.
I'll find a way to drop side 3 on the sun.
Yes, we will drop the White Base on Solomon as if it was a colony. Real quick, let's kind of go over. So the White Base, you have the captain gets injured. So Bright Noah takes over as the captain of the ship. Yeah. You also have Amuro and Fraubao join as well, but you also have Mirai Yashima. You have Hayato Kobayashi, Kai Shiden, and Ryu Hosei as kind of like your main crew of the White Base that you see most often. Mm-hmm. You also have Sayla Mass, who
I want to quickly actually note before we get into Sayla.
Yes.
We called Amuro a reluctant protagonist. I don't think anybody
correct.
is more reluctant in Kaishida.
This is great. I
the
disagree,
most reluctant man.
But I see what you're saying.
I mean,
he literally
not eventually,
his first appearance is that he shows up. He's like, I don't want anything to do with this. Sayla is like, did you see any survivors? And was anybody else still needing to be evacuated? And he's like, I don't know. I don't care. I got myself out of there. She slaps him.
Yes.
One of the first slaps in the series. Yep. And says, you are a coward. Like, just straight up, you are a coward.
Which, yeah, one of the most justified slaps, though. Let's be real.
Mm-hmm. But it's important. It's important that, because this is a character type, I have to try to be as succinct as possible with this. There are a lot of character archetypes that this series has that I feel personally a lot of anime and manga and film use later on, and they don't quite get it right. I think there are a lot of anime series that include this archetypal, like, coward character, or the kind of, like, sarcastic, scrawnier sidekick type who, just kind of jaws off a lot. They don't really do anything really effective. I adore Kai's story progression throughout the course of these 3 films.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it is one of the things that they
his arc is great.
They managed to maintain for the films. There is a lot of side character content that gets lost in these films, particularly for a lot of these other members of the White Base. But Kai is the one that they really managed to, like, hold on to a lot of it and keep it in the films, and I'm glad that they do. It is a really, really good arc that he goes through.
Absolutely. Otherwise, yeah, Kamaria Ray and Temray aren't on White Base, but obviously they become important characters if you couldn't tell, giving their last names. Their relation to Amuro.
They do become more later on. Yep.
But then Slegger is a later addition as well, and Matilda technically is not White Base either.
I intentionally set up these slides just so in case we needed to remember a name or a face, I could just pull this up and be like, this is the person we're thinking.
Yes, I have a reference sheet next to me as well.
Excellent.
Because I knew I would forget.
Yeah, we'll pop back. There we go.
Yes. Sorry.
So we're on the White Base. The Bright is told, I'm trying to find it in my notes here. The big thing is that they have to go to Jaburo.
And
their hope is that they will be able to get supplies at Lunar 2, which is an asteroid that is being used by the Federation. Their thing is like, we're going to drop off supplies, but we also want to drop off, all these refugees that we have, coming back to the kids thing. And they are told, no, We can't take you here for long. Our orders is that you need to head to Jaburo on Earth. It is a headquarter of the Earth Federation. That is where you need to go.
Right, which then leads to an interesting thing that doesn't get brought up really until then, which is that essentially it's like mobile suits are either on Earth or in space, but never from space to Earth. Right? Like,
yes,
they do not traditionally. They cannot do re-entry.
Yes. There is a fight between Amuro and Char, one of their first major conflicts with each other. Very quickly, Char like outmaneuvers him. He's much more experienced. To the point where Amuro, who is obviously still like a fledgling pilot, he is being immediately thrust into combat that he is not familiar with and has not been trained for. But yeah, he's not able to make it back to the white base, so he and a couple of the other Zaku's are falling towards the Earth. The understood idea is like you are going to burn up upon reentry, and that happens to some of the Zaku. Mm-hmm. But Amuro he goes back to the instruction manual, and he finds that there is actually defense systems set up in the Gundam for reentry, and is able to actually safely reenter the Earth's atmosphere.
Right. Which the whole thing is meant to predicate like why. Yes, obviously Amuro piloting it inevitably becomes more and more like as he grows as a pilot and as we get into it as a new type. That's, that obviously is a whole thing, but it really like placates to why not only that Zeon was so emphatic about finding this experimental Gundam, but
yes.
like why it is so like just different. Like it's not just like, ooh, yes, it like because like initially it's like, oh, it has this sword. Oh my god, like in the first fight, like when he's on side 6, they're like, oh my god, it has a sword. Like it's like, and then it just keeps obviously adding these new things and more and more and more. It's like, oh, and that's why like one of the early kind of weirdness things that it hits is like there's always the question from Char and whatnot where it's like, is the Gundam good? Like the Gundam is a better Gundam than you are a pilot kind of thing, right?
Yes, that is like, a big overarching theme here as well. It's like the idea,
and obviously over time we see this shift in that, right?
Yes,
but like obviously at the start that is the case, right? There's no. It's like it'd be kind of dumb to think that like part of it isn't just like Amuro finds thing in Gundam and that saves his ass, right? Because he doesn't know how to pilot, but that's the point. He's not supposed to know how to pilot it, like be an amazing pilot yet. He just learned the thing.
This is those real robot characteristics that we talked about in the first episode starting to really seep in, where instead of your main character being like, I am an immediate savant, I am super confident, I know exactly what I'm doing, it takes Amuro a while to really get used to actually piloting the Gundam.
Yeah, and that's why it's like it's good development, because obviously you're getting into, that realm of just, we start here, we get and then we get growth, and then we get shifting, because then obviously as time goes, that the confidence builds and the knowledge builds, and suddenly now it's this mixed bag, but it's just very clear, like as you go through all of the series for a long time, at least in the movie for a while, that like so many things are hingent on the fact that there is so much to this Gundam until it is. Well, I guess I don't know, because have we skipped over? I don't remember. Have we skipped over Gear? Even though we already talked about him, have we skipped over Garma at this point?
Nope. We are at Garma, because the white base arrives on Earth. The Federation is basically like, we're not going to help you out because you're technically in Zeon airspace. Yes. So sorry, good luck with that. Which is also a recurring theme, is that the Federation is very much like, we could help you, but what if we didn't help you out much at all, actually? But yes,
Yeah,
this is the moment where Char joins up with Garmazabi and is like, hey, man, I'll help you out. And I'm going to let you be the one to actually like destroy the white base. And you're going to look so cool. You're going to get promoted. Your bride-to-be is going to think you're so sick. Like, I'm a bro, and I'm going to help you out. And Karma's like, hey, thanks, man. That's so nice of you.
We grew up
glad
together,
you're my best
right?
friend, Char.
Yeah, like we were so cool
And then
in
he
the
twirls
academy
his hair.
together.
You know, he twirls his hair between his fingers and blushes. And
Yes. And then this is where we get to, because obviously it goes by relatively fast in the movie, which again, this is a realm of thought, but somewhat as they actually get into fighting each other, then all of a sudden we start to begin to see the questionable, or we begin to question and start to see maybe what could be the true colors of Char Aznable.
yes.
But as he betrays the shit out of him.
Right. But before even that, we also get, with Garma attacking the white base, we get what becomes very common, which is that Bright orders Amuro to get in the Gundam. And Amuro says, no, I'm actively experiencing PTSD for the first time in my life. I am traumatized. I'm freaking out. I'm not going to get in this Gundam for you. And Bright meets with him and Frau Bao. And this is where we get the Bright slap that everybody talks about. The big meme of the Bright slap that changes the world and saves everything. What's actually happening here is far more interesting. This could be its own episode, but that's just because I'm crazy like that about the psychology of this. But what's essentially happening here is that Bright simultaneously resents Amuro. He sees him as like very cowardly, very weak. He's like, you need to be a man. We have these very clear ideas of like, you need to be a man. A man stands up for what he believes in, and he fights. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't back down. Stop acting like a child. Stop, you need to be a man. And that's why he slaps him. And he goes as far as to say, like, is it that wrong for me to slap him? Am I not in the right for doing so? Hits him multiple times. And then something really interesting happens here where they find out that Char is attacking. And Amuro immediately turns face. He goes from being like, I can't stand this. I don't want to die. I'm freaking out. I've had to kill people. This is horrifying. To Char's out there. I'm going. He seems to immediately sort of attach to Char as this like singular entity of like, if I can beat Char, my problems will go away. This will fix the grief and the anger and the fear that I am experiencing, having been thrust into this war. If I can just beat Char, all of my problems will be solved. And he has this really interesting line that a lot of people don't talk about, where Frau Bao says, I'll pilot the Gundam. Screw it. Like, she's like, it's important to fight. We have to be able to stand up. I will even pilot the Gundam. And Amuro says, no, you can't do it. It's got to be me that does it. Even if I don't want to be, I am a man. And I think that is a really interesting statement in the psychology of how quote unquote manliness and masculinity is tied to performing these specific actions and being willing to fight in this war regardless of what is going to happen. And the thing that Amuro continues to repeat throughout these movies is the phrase, this is war. That becomes like his default, like, defensive statement. Anytime that he is being questioned for his actions, it's like, this is war. This is what I've been told I'm supposed to do. We're in war. This is what you do. And it's just a really interesting, compelling moment for Amuro and for his development. After Amuro has been motivated by the Bright Slap,
which also the concept of it, like the fact that like such that motivation is just like, oh wait, Char's here, man.
Char's
it's just so feeding to all of the general Amuro Char shit,
dude. There's more as it goes.
I know. Yeah. It only gets deeper. It only gets deeper. Yes. But yeah, so we've got him. So he kind of is like, okay, time to fight him. Real shit.
Amuro gets back in the Gundam. He manages to defeat the Garma team pretty easily. It's not like a huge deal. Char. The important thing here, Char is like, hey, you seem a little like distracted. Like obviously he is concerned about, he's thinking about his bride to be because of Garma's whole situation of like, I'm going to find the white base and destroy it and destroy this Gundam. I'm going to get the accolades for it. My family will be proud of me. And then, I'm going to bring you over to our side and we're going to get married and live happily ever after. And he's...
pause.
Yes.
Hold on. Discord's being stupid. I need to fix something. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know why this was not going or whatever, but I'm going to make sure that's on now. Continue.
Yes. It seems like Garma is so preoccupied with like making sure that everything goes well. He's making rash decisions. Char is the one to come in and be like, hey, you seem a little stressed out. You're unfocused. I will go find the white base for you. And I'll scope them out. I'll find out where they're located and let you know so that you can then swoop in and be the big hero. He finds them. And then Char decides to not tell Garma where they are. Instead, he has them continue flying on their trajectory, which allows the white base to attack them from behind and effectively destroy the fleet.
Right, which immediately gives you this realm of like, what? Like, oh, like, well, like, so like, obviously if you're coming into this with like no thought, right, you're like, oh, is Char secretly a good guy?
Yeah, you immediately doubt
your initial thought.
Yeah, you immediately doubt his intentions. From this point on, you have no reason to suspect that he's anything other than like this loyal lieutenant in the Zeon army. And then this moment happens and it's like, okay, now wait a minute, there's some sort of ulterior motive here.
Right, because like he's dressed in a very, like, he's the most differently dressed so far.
He is a highly decorated,
yeah, like he's got this fancy red suit and the big helmet and the eye covers, and it's like, and then you see Garma, who is this youngest son, but still the son of the leader of the Zabi family, and the whole leader of Zeon, and he's dressed like every other freaking Zeon officer. He doesn't have a special outfit. Obviously his siblings will, but we don't see them yet. So as far as we know, he's dressed like every other normal person. So like you have this thought going into it that like Char's clearly a very important person in the Zeon military. But then now you've got this clearly important guy because he's the son of the Zeon dynasty, and this guy now suddenly betrays the son of the Zeon dynasty, and you're like, what?
And laughs while doing it.
Yeah, how are you supposed, like, how can you be a double agent, right? Like, is like the first thought is like, that was my thought. I'm like, well, I know you're not a double agent, Char, but like, what the fuck is this supposed to make you? You know, because I have some knowledge, right, in knowing before going into this because of just general various, you know, just various like things about Char, and like no matter what iteration of Gundam, Char has always been around. He's always been in some essentially Xeon things. So it's my thoughts more in that realm of like, what the fuck are you on about, Char?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you've only picked up, if you only picked up things here and there in just like pop culture and general conversation, you would assume that like you would assume he's like a diehard, member of Xeon's fleet who is his, full intention is just to kill Amuro Ray and destroy the white base, and that that's all there is to it. But this is our first indication that there is actually a much deeper motive that is hidden behind those fancy goggles. So yeah, he tells Garma, he says, don't blame me or yourself, blame your family. It's their fault. And Garma is shot down. He tries to ram his battleship into the base, and it gets destroyed, and he is killed. Obviously, the Zabi family isn't made aware that like Char directly betrayed him. All they know is that Garma has died, and that Char effectively failed to protect him, as opposed to like full on betrayed him.
I do want to make a quick note on that though, and I don't, because it doesn't really come up much later. So I feel like this is maybe a good time as any to at least just at least bring the question in. So in the movie, they kind of allude to, though, that because of this incident, Char kind of gets a little bit of disfavor. And it almost makes it sound like that they know that Char had something to do with it. But like, nothing is ever shown to implicate that they do know. And not only that, maybe that they do know, but also that, he is punished in any way for it. So it just makes it somewhat questioning of just like
this is one of the things that kind of gets cut out of the films that you get a little more context for in the actual series itself. Specifically like the situation around, Garma's passing and like Dozo Zabi, who Char is working under at that time. Dozel's thing of like, I want Char to be punished because he was supposed to be protecting Garma and that didn't happen. And Degen Soto being like, all right, well, relocate him, effectively fire him. He's, we're gonna shift him around within the organization as a punishment for what has happened.
But he will not be like immediate. He won't be truly removed. And I'm guessing Degwin has some clear reasons for that, but that's a later discussion. But they that's the thing that kind of got just slightly I don't know if maybe I did just miss it, but like that I was maybe a little bit confused on. But that's where I was confused on, like, I guess, like, I don't think it was because they believed he had any reason to believe it was on purpose, but I definitely know that it was in relation to the fact that, like, because they mentioned that, like, it was because essentially it was essentially a failure of his, or like because of an action / maybe inaction, that it led to Garma dying, and they do look at him as somewhat like they look at him as at fault, but not as the result. You know what I mean? Like,
not
they're not
directly
saying
responsible.
You killed him, but it's you let him die is
correct.
Seemingly then what it is. Okay.
Yes.
That was the one thing that I just got confused on. It doesn't come up till later because this is mostly from a plot device standpoint. It's just what means that, like, it's the explanation to why there's going to be a period right now where we don't see Char for a minute. But is partly just an explanation that I wanted just some quick relation on because it gets brushed over in the movie, and therefore I won't have the context for it.
Yes. No, there's definitely some of the additional context that you're missing out that does get. This is one of the examples of like some of that additional context getting removed. Real quick, super quick. Isolina, the woman that Garma was intending to marry, in the film,
Yes.
obviously she finds out from her father that Garma has passed away, and she is distraught. And that is effectively the last that we see of her. It's a very touching scene, but we don't really get much from her after that. The anime does expand on that. There is more that she does that is just completely cut out. Her story is not over. There is more to it, but it does get cut. In the grand scheme of this story, it's not that big of a deal. But just in case that also was kind of like it feels weird that we're just kind of like cutting this off, there is more to that as well that got removed.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that. I feel like it made sense that it's like she goes off, she's entirely distraught, and it's just, again, it just hits into the realm that like this type of behavior, in like war, battle, and like the fact that these people die is inherently, it affects more than just the people who are in the suits, in the ships. It's the people that cared about them. And I mean, we see that with a couple of zombie family members, or specifically one other later. But that is a big... that was a thing where, though, like her reaction and the way that they showcased it made sense to me. So I was fine with that.
Yeah. So yeah, Garma passes away. The White Base, they find themselves near Amuro's hometown. So Amuro decides that he is going to see if he can visit his mother, who he hasn't seen in a very long time. And this is where we actually get to learn a little bit more about Amuro's past before the events of the series in the movies. We come to understand that like he left with his father to go live on the colony. His mother refused to go. She insisted. She was like, I cannot bring myself to go live in space, and effectively stayed behind. And as such, Amuro returns to find a bunch of drunken soldiers in their house and no sign of his mother, and goes to track her down, picks up a puppet, like a puppet doll that is very important to him from his childhood. And he finds her at a there's like a refugee camp that's nearby.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's just like a refugee camp. I don't think it's like a proper village or anything.
Yeah, but they're obviously scared because Xeon units are visiting them like almost daily, and
they get air raided potentially.
Yeah, there was a major air raid that occurred that killed a lot of people.
Yeah, they like have him hide his Federation ship in the bushes. It's like very clear that they don't want it to appear like Federation members will come there because they're trying to essentially just act as neutral victims.
Survive, is the main thing. It's like, but yeah, he hides his ship, and then they end up having to hide him because, sure enough, some Xeon soldiers arrive. The big thing that happens here is that Amuro kills one of them. He shoots him through the blanket. And his mother, her reaction is kind of the big thing that happens here, is that she has gone from not seeing Amuro for most of his life to suddenly being reunited with him to then seeing him kill someone. Shoot someone with a gun and then actively try to shoot another person. As a result, she is like, her reaction is very like angry. Like, why would you do that? That's not the Amuro that I know, that I raised, and he very much is not receptive to that. He's obviously dealing with a lot, but again, this is where he kind of locks into that, like, this is war mentality. Like, this is what I have to do. I'm doing it because I'm required to do so. You don't understand, and runs off. Right.
And I mean, you want to. This is always one of those. This is one of those where I was watching it and I'm like, girl, what leg do you have to stand on? The judge's ass. You're like, and she's like, this is what happens when you went with your father. It's like, well, you left, you let him leave. Like, you didn't go with him. Like, what choice do you have? Like, what do you mean? What about your own decisions in this? Like, don't fucking.
I won't go ham on this. I do have a lot to say about this relationship. I think it does. I'm not going to say it's perfect. It could be a little better, like, articulated.
Well, yeah.
But I understand and I appreciate her position as a mother. The feeling of being reunited with your son after so long and having that, like, joyous feeling so quickly cut off by realizing how much he has changed in his absence. And that, like, the weird combination of, like, wanting to protect them, having to immediately come to terms with them effectively being an adult. He's 15, it should be noted.
Yes.
But he has effectively become an adult in her eyes very quickly. And she never, ever considered the possibility of him having to live the type of life where he would have to kill people. And it is so much for her to have to take in a very short amount of time. Mm-hmm. I can appreciate that her reaction would be that way, that she is like, you are nothing like the child that I remember. And I am, like, ashamed of you because I see somebody that is completely different from the Amuro that I knew. She obviously lacks a lot of the context of what Amuro has been through in this time. He hasn't been able to properly explain anything to her. But I understand it. I can understand.
Yes. But I think it's all too then attributive to people who have had various familial things in their lives where it's just like, you know, the idea that you can willingly choose to, while you're not the one who left, effectively still make the choice to abandon your son. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, that was the thing. You're like, I don't want to go into space. And he's like, well, my job is making me go to space. And the kid's like, yeah, I want to go to space. And whatever meaning you do, you stay, you made that choice. And there's a lot of people out there who have dealt with what a lot of people could look at as abandonment or neglect or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then see that, like, oh, well, you know, I haven't been part of your life up until now, but I need to tell you that you're doing this wrong or you're bad or whatever in my eyes. And it's like, you know, there's a lot of people that do look at that and would be like, well, shove off. You weren't, like, if you have to blame anybody, you have to blame yourself. This, like, you weren't there for me. What is that supposed to do? Like, you know, what good is you telling me that now? But like, obviously Amuro does not think that way because he hasn't had, I mean, he hasn't, those are people that have come to that understanding about their relationship, where Amuro is not. He is in this belief going into it that it's like, oh, I'll go back to my mother and she'll be able to make me feel better about all the things that I've done, kind of, right? Where it's like,
definitely. He's looking for stability. He is looking for closure.
Yeah. And, you know, when she doesn't give that, he doesn't come to that conclusion, but it hurts, obviously. So it hurts him because he's got that conflicting feeling of like, I've literally only been doing what I have been told to do and what I've had to do, because otherwise I would be dead. It's like, because the reality for Amuro, it's like, the conflicting part is like, if I don't do what I did, I'd be dead now, and I wouldn't have saw my mom, and you wouldn't have seen me. So like, there's potentially maybe that inner conflict because of like, he could think easily like, well, if I didn't do what I did, I wouldn't have saw her anyway. Versus then like, am I a monster? Am I, you know, like has what created a monster out of me? Mm-hmm. You know, am I worse now for that? And I think what's funny is when we get in, obviously, because we can get into segments with when he struggles to deal with things with each of his parents, that it's funny because like this is almost like the setup, the alley-oop for will become the slam dunk in Amuro's mental growth.
Mm-hmm.
But inevitably that's kind of where everything ends movie wise. It kind of just ends there.
So because at this point it's clear that his relationship with the white base is becoming more complex. He's starting to sort of see himself more as a member of the white base than he did previously, though obviously still dealing with a lot of trauma. He makes the decision to stay with the white base and to continue to fight in the war, leaves his mother behind again. The Zabi family holds a great big funeral for Garma. And the big thing here is that obviously they are using Garma's death as this sort of martyrdom to encourage everyone to continue fighting. It's like, we need the war. The war is important. Don't just grieve. Be angry. Be angry at the Federation. This is all the Federation's fault. And Giran Zabi is obviously taking advantage of this to continue to grow favor and support, not just for the family, but for himself.
Right. And then we get our very iconic, at least from the movie perspective, very iconically first true Nazi Germany allegory to the Zeon Federation.
What?
So, and obviously that will come through later when we get into more and more, especially on Mr. Giran Zabi himself. But that's a later part because that's that really mostly hits in the third movie.
Yeah.
So, yes.
But that is kind of
that technically ends the first movie.
That is essentially the end of the first film there. Yeah. As we move on to our second film, Mobile Suit Gundam 2 Soldiers of Sorrow.
Yes.
And we move on as well to one Rambo Ral.
Yes. So Rambo becomes a pretty almost pivotal character, like even not just for the series, because honestly, if you think about it, Rambo in the grand scheme of the war doesn't mean a whole lot. What he means a lot to
he's an experienced soldier, but he's not like a high-ranking officer.
You would see him initially and think he is just a monster, the robot of the week Gundam, right? Or Zaku. But thing for the Gundam.
You mean the goof?
The goof.
The goof. It's how it's pronounced. The goof.
But he's very important for the development of Amuro.
Yes.
Not only, I guess, him, but him and almost, and his, were they married? His lover, wife?
I
can't remember if they were married or not. Okay.
If I'm remembering correctly, I believe Crowley Haman and Rambo were. That could be a big point that I'm missing. Because there's a few of those relationships in this series of people who are intending to marry or, are already married.
I can't remember because I felt like I remembered kind of that.
I'm pretty sure they're married.
Let me see here if I can find it here. Let's see. Where is? Oh no, it's not in here. Let's see. Is it in Crowley's thing? The wiki has it labeled as the common law wife of Rambo Ral.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Common law.
And so both of them though place a lot of, because they are obviously getting into it. So we get into another sequence where they kind of start beginning to hear the whole thing about the concept of new types, which we talked about in the original episode.
Yes.
And it's kind of twofold, really. I feel like one thing hits Amuro way harder than the other, which is all of a sudden we get into this sequence where Bright and Mirai are talking. They're talking about Amuro,
yes.
And they're talking about they begin talking about the new type concept. But then one of the things that they get in, so obviously Bright mentions that he thinks Amuro could be a new type. But then what he specifically mentions is that Amuro, or that he wants to replace Amuro so that he doesn't get a big head. Right. He doesn't become like conceited that he's super crazy awesome because he's good at the Gundam.
But it's definitely more like that is what he's presenting on the surface, because that's kind of what Bright tends to do.
Right.
But obviously there is this understated feeling of like, a lot of people don't even believe new types exist in the first place. We don't fully understand what they're capable of and what they can do. And there's definitely like a fear of like, if he is a new type, we don't know exactly what he could do. And he could actually be very dangerous to us.
Right. But like in the part that especially Amuro hears, that part isn't really said.
Right.
So I feel like the thing that Amuro kind of gets probably the most upset about, which I kind of had mixed feelings on why he at this point is offended so much by this, at least to this extent.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could see him maybe being a bit like annoyed at Bright or like a little insubordinate after hearing this, but like after everything to then all of a sudden hear like, that Amuro could get a little cocky. I think I'm going to take him out of the Gundam for a minute. And to then steal the Gundam and run away felt a little weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, as far as we saw, or as far as I saw from at least what they showed in the movie and whatnot, that like the main thing he really heard is that he doesn't understand what new types are. He doesn't really believe it, even if he is even if he thinks Amuro is a new type. He's like, regardless, I'm going to take him out of the Gundam, and because I don't want him to get a big head over himself, right? And that obviously, like, that's the part that Amuro hears. That's what he gets caught up in and runs away in the Gundam. And I kind of felt like it was like, is that not a level of emotion that have we not moved past that at this point? Like, it just felt very samey to the other things that he already had, these like I've done it and gotten over it type things. And in a show, in real life, I know that happens, right? Duh. Like, you don't just get over things. But in a show, I'm speaking of this from a show perspective, it's like we need a bigger reason why we're retreading that type of like that isn't really necessarily trauma as much as it is like the feeling of self-doubt, questioning one's existence and all that, and it's just like, I felt like it's like, I feel like if we're going to bring this up, I don't feel like this was the reason to bring that up. Right. Like, to me, if anything were to bring that up, maybe it would be like he lost a really bad fight to Char, or like a first fight with Ramba going even worse, right? Because I think before this, he fights Ramba in the goof.
Right.
And he doesn't really, and he doesn't succeed. They kind of lose the fight, right?
Well, there's more to
I know.
Specifically what happens is that Sayla takes the Gundam herself without the approval of anyone. She is nearly killed by Ramba, and Amuro has to save her. And I think that also ties into why Amuro decides to leave with the Gundam, because the longer he is spending fighting, the more he is kind of tying his own personal identity. Again, going back to the like being a man thing, like he is tying his own sense of self-worth to his ability to pilot the Gundam and him alone being the person that can do that. And I think when Sayla takes the Gundam, a couple things happen where, one, he begins to have those doubts of like, how much am I actually needed? That is exacerbated by what Bright says. But I think it's also something of like, if other people if they go through with that and they have others pilot the Gundam instead, they're going to die. Nobody can pilot the Gundam the way that I can. This is only going to result in these people that I am growing to really care about killing themselves. And so that's why it's like, I can't just run away. I need to take the Gundam with me to ensure that nobody pilots it and potentially dies because I couldn't pilot it myself.
Right. And I wish that through line was carried a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, I think it's an implicit type thing that could have been made more explicit.
Right, and because as it's presented, it makes it feel a little bit more like it's just like him having a teenage moment.
Definitely. Yeah.
And there's a concept. There's always a concept for the teenage moment. I'll talk about that a lot when we talk about Char's counterattack. But it just didn't feel like the right point. But I think you saying it like that would have been, if that was made much clearer, that would have then made that feel not only more impactful but more sensible, right? Where it's like, because the big thing I think I got was that it is clear that he somewhat thinks that like, if I don't pilot the Gundam, I should be the only one to pilot the Gundam. But like, that kind of would then prove Bright's point, you know? And so it's just kind of like, and obviously though he doesn't get that, and that's then a whole question, but it's just like, it just felt like we were retreading ground again.
I get you. Yeah.
I feel like we should come back to why Sayla took the Gundam when in the next episode, when we talk obviously about her probably a little bit more.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I think we'll come back to that. So keep a pin.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we got to keep pins on because
the fact that we mentioned,
they get kind of brought up or resolved in later portions. Moments.
Yes. And I think it'll be good to just bring that part up then.
Yes.
But for now, Amuro
takes the Gundam. He is hidden out in the desert, buries the Gundam himself. I'm not going to ask how he managed
let's skip over that.
How much time he had to bury it, but all right.
Yeah. Clearly a lot.
But this is where he runs into Rambo Ral outside of fighting in these mobile suits.
Yes, because he kind of wanders. There's a nearby, what I would have thought would have been an abandoned town when he walked into it, but I guess has someone in it.
But there's a bar and there's a bartender.
He walks into a bar. Yep. So, and all of a sudden, he just sees initially here's a bunch of Zeon walking in. Shit. What am I I need to just play cool, because he's cloaked himself. I mean, nobody really in Zeon knows Amuro.
Yeah,
they just know the white Gundam.
They still don't know that it's called the Gundam, and they're still calling the white. They know the white. Like they don't. They only know what
they just know the white. Yeah, the white mobile suit. Like, and then the Trojan horse. Like, so he kind of knows that, right? So he's just kind of like, I just need to play cool. Yes. Try not to show my face too much. Not he's not garbed in his Federation gear, so he's fine there. He knows that. So he's just like, okay, I'm good, and then he's
Haman,
just trying to hang out.
Haman immediately takes a shine to him. Is like, make food for everyone, including that stranger over there.
Yes.
And Amuro is forced into conversation with them, which causes him to become very confused because he kind of gets along.
They're all having a good time.
Yeah, they're not immediately trying to kill him, and they seem like generally normal
and they didn't
people.
Right, and they didn't go into the bar. Like, what she says, make food for everybody, right? She's not like...
Yeah, they don't threaten the bartender at any point.
She's not like, make this or die. She asks for a food. There's a point where he's like, oh, I don't really do that. He's like, well, what do you do? They're like, all right, all of that then.
Yeah.
They're reasonable.
No,
they're there to have a good time.
It's another one of those tropes that you see in a bunch of stories after this, where the default is that they would like threaten his life and like make it very clear that they're bad people. But in this case, it's like, no, they're intimidating, they're imposing, but they're not actively like throwing their weight around.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes you think of like, and it makes Amuro think like, what is this? What we're fighting? You know?
Yes.
And again, it kind of comes into like, is this what war does? You know? And then obviously that gets further thrown into a wrench because he's like, you know, he goes, because, you know, here's the thing, you know what? It clearly must have taken him a while to bury that Gundam because it was enough for fucking Fraubo to show up.
Yeah, that's true. Fraubo
At
then
that
arrives
point,
as well. Yep.
Somehow what would seem like that fast, but it's actually just because probably took them a minute to bury that, and it was enough for them to get close enough. Where all of a sudden, then all this could happen now, and here we are. Then Fraubo shows up and is like, "You need to get over here." And obviously, like Hammond especially plays with Amuro and like, "Oh, is this your girlfriend?" You know, that type of stuff. And like just keep playing with them on it. They're like, oh, but she's wearing a Federation thing. And obviously they play it the smart tactical thing though, right? Where it's like, because whether or not Ramba is maybe a good person, right? He is still a soldier. They're still at war. So what does he do? He's like, they're like, let him go. But then when they leave, they're like, we'll follow him.
Yes.
Trail him. You know? And that maybe is a combination of being that's maybe a combination, obviously, of like being Fraubo or Amuro's fault, right? And the concept of like, why would they not think that they could be trailed? But and that's obviously that's inexperience, not being soldiers, not being trained soldiers.
Yes, absolutely.
But like, you know, there is also somewhat the concept, again, that similar thing of like not being trained and thinking like, why would you think that you could go into this essentially neutral war zone and think that wearing a Federation uniform is not going to be a problem somewhere, somehow, and not get you potentially some type of negative attention, right? But again, not soldiers.
Yeah.
So thus, here we are. But you know, they're beginning to be trailed, but they have a conversation on the way out. You know, which I feel like is a bit of a mixed bag, right? Because we talked about how Fraubo is, you know, a often looked at maternal figure, but also this is kind of hitting into a point where now, you know, Amuro is beginning to try to question and understand his place and everything. And she's obviously trying to bring him back. But it's like, he's like, I don't know, you know? And now he's got this extra baggage of, hey, there's this like thing of the fact that everybody's pretty good, seemingly. So he, you know, he is like, I'm going to leave you. Like, you go back. Like, he gets off. He's like, you go back. Effectively, he's going to end up walking back to the Gundam.
Right.
But, you know, he's just like, I'm going to leave you here. You go back. I'm not joining you. So he seems committed at this point that he's just going to keep having his own time here. Which, would be which would honestly though be a great concept of somebody who just has to wander around in a fucking Gundam as just like a random
just
wanderer.
sort of a Lone Ranger type.
Yeah, that's great character concept. That doesn't happen though, because Amuro sees Zaku's and Zeon forces moving and is like, oh shit.
Yeah. So this is the thing is like a lot of this just kind of gets cut off because as soon as he realizes that like, okay, Rambarel has discovered the location of the white base and is forming an attack. It's like, well, I can't run away from this as much as I wanted to. I actually have to do something about it.
Because as much as he wanted to prevent somebody else from dying in the Gundam, he knows that without the Gundam, that white base is pretty vulnerable.
Yes, it's becoming a damned if you don't situation for him.
Mm-hmm. And right, and so like, and Amuro has some intimidation of Ramba when it comes to his goof, because like it. Yeah, I mean, the thing was, it was looked at as like a formidable kind of, not only just like a good, he's a good pilot and tactician, but then obviously just this was a very different Zaku that they were not used to fighting. So, he obviously kind of goes into it like am I gonna be good? Like, am I gonna make it through this? But obviously he has to fight it anyway because that's what he's got to do.
Yes, so, and he does. So they fight. Eventually, the goof itself is destroyed, but Ramba escapes. He manages to get away. And Amuro gets locked up in solitary confinement because he took the Gundam without permission. Same thing that Sayla went through. And when Ramba attacks the next time around, their big thing is like, they've been ordered to capture the white base, but not to damage it. So instead of attacking with just the mobile units, they have to infiltrate it and go inside the white base.
Yes. Which is one of the first times we see that. And similarly then is also one of the times, again, you get this like clear notion that often gets put in, honestly, that gives you the most... that makes you question the Federation's motives the most, which is it's only ever Zeon people that have to have the question, they have children?
Yes, they're putting the mine on the window to blow the window out and still have the decency to tell the kid like, hey, move away from the window.
Yeah. But then they have to be like, why do they have children on board?
Yeah. That's weird. Why are they must not have a lot of soldiers on their end either if they're employing kids. He's so young. Like, yeah, that's definitely like a thing.
Yeah,
that gets brought
and I
up
mean, you
times.
see that, and I mean, that gets brought up in many series that have like Zeon/Federation type themes or whatever, whether or not they're part of this universe or not, is whenever they have to bring up the fact that it's just like, you pilot that thing, but you're just a child. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like that's a great thing because that always makes you question the Federation's motives.
Yeah. The willingness of the Federation to just like write off a lot of this on younger, inexperienced ensigns and being like, we're okay with you being our decoys. We're fine with that.
Yeah. And that's effectively what White Base has been told essentially it will be by or I don't know, I guess. No, it wasn't at this point. That was later. That's later.
It comes more into play a little later.
Yeah,
but they've effectively been hopping around getting the attention of Zeon and sort of distracting them in a way.
But like the big thing then ends up being that like, obviously, so they are being fairly effective at it to start,
Yes.
And then, because I mean, Amuro, they kind of this is where maybe it gets rushed a little bit. They kind of just bring Amuro out of confinement, right?
They have to. They effectively have to. It's like we have no choice. Yeah. We're being overwhelmed. Ramba himself makes his way onto the base. He encounters Sayla and immediately recognizes her. Which is a big deal because Sayla is not who she say she was.
Nice try there.
No, he recognizes her as Artesia as opposed to Sayla.
Yes.
Who he knew since she was a child. As soon as he realizes that she's there, he's like, what is going on? Sayla tries to kind of play both sides in the moment.
Yes.
And
because she's trying to get someone answers about something else that we'll talk about in the next episode.
Yes, she's trying to get answers on things. She's also trying not to completely blow her cover either way. So it's a very tense situation of like, what do I actively do in this moment? A lot of confusion going around. And Ramble decides to order a retreat. He's like, we're taking losses. But also, if that is Artesia on the ship, I don't want her killed. We need to retreat, get everybody off the ship. And he ends up sort of cornered, nowhere to go. He gets shot and knows that this is probably the end for him. So he ends up sacrificing himself with a grenade as he jumps out a window.
Right, which is inherently obviously his dedication to Zeon and similarly not being captured.
Yes.
Despite that in a future point that becomes like a whole, somebody uses that to advantage, but like anyway, this obviously then leads to Hammond being quite affected by it.
Absolutely. Because at multiple points she had asked, is this really important? Like, do we need to involve ourselves in this? And the thing Ramba always came back with was like, this is about revenge. This is about taking revenge for, why am I blanking on his name?
Garma.
Our boy Garma Zabi.
Yeah. Yes. And
that's
not
why
only that,
he's
though,
there is to take revenge for Garma. That's like his primary.
But that's also what I really love about Hammond as a character is, especially back then, it's part of the things that help make this a very well-aged series is, like when he dies, she has a very obviously hectic reaction about it and emotional and sorrowful, but like, who wouldn't for somebody that they loved?
Yeah, of course.
The big thing is though, what her relationship in this whole thing is, she is just as authoritative and on the nose about this as Rama. And like, she's not just like, classic trophy piece, wife character. She's not generic or stereotypical female character in anime. She is very much a like in the like willing to be in the fight, like woman who is very much like no nonsense, but also like is willing to keep Ramba on the ball, like not let him stay distracted, not get him in any like she doesn't press him in any weird way that were to suddenly make him question everything. Like she acts very.
They are largely equals
with each other.
They are largely equals. It is a relationship that we haven't seen a lot of at this point in the series. The power dynamic that we're seeing here is a lot more balanced.
Yes, and I love that.
Yeah.
But obviously, as we get into it, then she essentially assists in launching this gigantic counter revenge strike effectively. Now for her, it's about Ramba, that revenge. At this point, the revenge for Garma is little to nothing to her. It's all about revenging Ramba.
It wasn't even a big deal to her previously. And that's another thing that we're seeing here is how not everyone in the Zeon fleet is like cares heavily about what happens to the Zabi family. Like they're not all like 100% diehard, you know, I would do anything for them. You know, a lot of people have their own motivations for being a part of the war.
Right, exactly. And so she launches this fight, and this, you know, she puts up a very strong fight, but is inevitably, when her plan to essentially Kareem their mobile base into white base could have worked in some regard. And when Amuro kind of stops it, she pins Amuro because she obviously blames him kind of for Ramba's death, and specifically the Gundam, though, obviously. And like essentially gets him pinned down with her own like fighter ship or jet or whatever. And then we get one of our first instances of our like the Federation side self-sacrifices in Ryu Jose.
Yes.
Coming off of injury from said fight with Ramba to save Amuro by crashing his jet into hers.
Yep, rams himself into her jet, destroys them both.
But then also then gives obviously Amuro the capacity to Kareem the enemy, like her former and like the enemy base away from white base so that it doesn't just destroy it completely.
Yeah.
And obviously because Amuro kind of puts together that obviously both of them have died now, he's like, I wouldn't say like it destroys him or whatever, but he's like, he has a somberness about it. He's just like, you know, it's the damn.
No, yeah, I mean, he's distraught about it, but we're seeing a person who has experienced a large amount of trauma over a very
short period of time,
and is kind of like really struggling with how to actually express and deal with the things that he is having to deal with here. But yeah, Ryu makes his noble sacrifice. That
probably hits him more than Hammond and Rama going away.
It does. I think for sure. There's definitely there is a level of regret to him where he's like, I hate that Haman and Ramba had to die like this. But yeah,
but it really hits,
Ryu's
I think,
death
a lot of
is what hits him.
Yeah, and I mean, but it definitely hits, I think, other members of White Base more.
Absolutely.
Obviously, like especially Hayato, because effectively they would pilot the gun tank.
Yes.
Together.
The gun tank while Kai was on the gun cannon. Yes.
Yeah. And so like that was, I think, a big factor, obviously, and I think in the development of a lot of the sub characters, more than just Amuro.
Yes, definitely.
You know, it just, I think it's one of the things though that I think what it was really good at doing, it was really good at then I think really rebonding everybody, like all this stuff of like why they put Amuro, like why Bright was going to put Amuro out of the Gundam. Well, you know, obviously them putting him into solitary confinement, you know, even Sayla having like a little bit of just like, she had this mixed thing of like trying to figure her life out, but like everybody, it kind of rebinds everybody inside a White Base, right? His martyrdom rebinds everybody and kind of holds it back together. Which then makes it a good reset point for next episode.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it off there. They sort of have their memorial for Ryu and the other soldiers that have fallen. Because this is definitely, from this point on, this is a pretty big turning point as they begin to travel to Odessa. You know, a lot more revelations are like right around the corner. And the relationship between sort of that triumvirate of Amuro, Sayla, and Char is about to become a lot more complex.
And a lot more prevalent.
Yeah, so we can definitely, I think that's a good cutting off point there that we can pick up on in the future.
No, absolutely. We can kind of hit it there, and as we mentioned previously, this month is going to be a little anemic on episodes. We're going to record some things when we can, but do not expect them to. I do expect some episodes to be there. Just try to hold with us. Got a lot of stuff coming in outside of the podcast, so we're going to do our best to do for what we can, but for now, this will be here this week, and I can't tell you what or when the next episode will be. But from there, we will we'll take you out.
All right, thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Mobile Suit Gundam: Dylan's Counterattack. Thank you again for the positive support that you showed on the first episode. We hope you all continue to stick around for this and for Heretic Hammer. Marshall, at this point in the series, are you having fun? Are you enjoying it? You loving the Gundam?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously we'll get into this at different points later because we had to talk a lot about the actual thing this episode.
Right.
But, we're in it.
Absolutely.
We're here. All right. But we'll get into that later. For now.
All right. Get in your catapults and sail on out of here. Goodbye.